Guys, so this week we're going to be starting a new series on Moses, so we thought we'd start by looking at where he fits into God's big story.
Moses came from the tribe of Levi. He came from the family of Levi, one of Joseph's brothers. Many years passed after Joseph and his brothers and their families had been brought safely to live in Egypt. And soon that whole generation had died, and a new king who knew nothing about Joseph came to power in Egypt. God had blessed the Israelites, Joseph's family, and there were now loads of them living in the land. The new Pharaoh did not like this and felt threatened by God's people, so he made them slaves and forced them to do really hard jobs. But God still continued to bless them. So Pharaoh ordered for all of the baby boys born to the Hebrews, Joseph's descendants, to be thrown into the river Nile. It was during this time that Moses was born. When Moses is born, his mum hides him in a basket and places him amongst the reeds along the bank of the river Nile. Pharaoh's daughter comes across the basket and finds Moses and feels sorry for him, so she adopts him as her own son.
As Moses grows older, he sees how his people are being treated, and this angers him, and he ends up killing one of the Egyptians who was treating them harshly. He then has to flee Egypt and lives many years in a place called Midian.
As the years went on, God's people continued to be treated very harshly and were suffering greatly, and they began to cry out to God to save them. God decided to use Moses to bring about the rescue of his people.
While Moses is looking after the sheep for his father-in-law, God appears to him through a burning bush. So let's jump into today's story, which is found in Exodus chapter 3 verse 1 to chapter 4 verse 17. So you may prefer to use one of the animated videos included in the description or guide, or use a story version. First, God attracts Moses' attention away from the ordinary things of life to cause him to stop, listen and hear what God has to say.
God may not appear to us through a burning bush, but he does still like to prompt us to stop and come away from the normal things of life and hear what he has to say to us. As Moses stops, he encounters God and is reminded of his holiness, his greatness. God then tells Moses that he has heard the cries of his people and he is going to rescue them from the Egyptians, and he wants to use Moses.
God cares about justice, rightness and fairness. He hates to see his people captive or enslaved, and he longs to set them free, and he loves to use us to do so. Jesus says in Luke 4 verse 18 to 19, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour."
This was foretold in the Old Testament by someone called Isaiah, who heard the Lord speak this. And Jesus says, "This is what I have come to earth to do." And when he ascends back to heaven, he says to us, "Now you are to continue this work that I have begun." And he sends the Holy Spirit to help and empower us to do so.
God sends us. We will all know people who are trapped or enslaved or going through a hard time, just like the Israelites. It just may look different. For example, people may be sad, afraid, worried, hurt, or just going through a hard time, and Jesus wants to set them free too.
In Exodus 3 verses 10, God says to Moses, "So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring the Israelites out of Egypt." Egypt was trapping and enslaving the Israelites. Today, God sends us out into the world to rescue people from being trapped or held back by the ways of the world.
Why not pause and discuss or brainstorm some of the things that you think may enslave or trap people today? God cares about the poor and the oppressed and the injustice that is shown to them. Why not discuss, ask God and pray about something that you could do as a family this week to proclaim good news to the poor or the oppressed to help set them free?
Mother Teresa, a great woman of God who some of you may have learned about in school, had a great heart for the poor, and she famously said this: "We ourselves feel that what we are doing is but a drop in the ocean, but I think that if that drop were not there, the ocean would be less for that missing drop."
It's like that story about the boy and the starfish. A boy is on a beach surrounded by thousands of starfish stranded on the sand. He starts to pick them up one by one and place them back in the sea. A man nearby asks him why is he bothering to do so, saying it won't make any difference at all. But the boy picks up another starfish, places it into the sea and says it just made a difference for that one.
We want to encourage you guys that as young people and as children, you can make a real difference in this world. When you offer yourself up to Him, God can use you in amazing ways to bless the poor and to set free the oppressed.
As most of you will know, I am also a primary school teacher, and it always encourages me to see the compassion, drive and heart that you as young people and children can have to see change in this world for good. And just like these examples show, it doesn't have to be big, but small ideas inspired by Jesus can have a big impact on someone's life. Just like the story of the one lost sheep, God cares about the one and searches and seeks until He finds them and brings them home.
Don't feel like you're good enough? Well, Moses responds to God by saying, "Who am I that I should bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt?" Often we can feel like Moses, that we are not good enough or funny enough or skilled enough or relatable enough to make a difference for God or to share His good news with those who are lost or those who are trapped by the ways of this world.
Yet God says the same to us as He did to Moses. He says, "I am with you." God sends us out, but He goes with us. Just like the lyrics from the song The Blessing says, He goes before us and behind us and beside us, all around us. He's within us and He is with us.
We encounter God. Before God sends Moses on this mission, He reveals to him who He is. Moses has this really personal encounter with God that will sustain him for the things he will have to do and step out and trust in God for later on. He reveals Himself to Moses, "I am," and tells Moses to say to the Israelites that the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you.
God never ever gives up on His promises. He always fulfills them. Moses is worried that the people won't believe him, but God reassures him by showing him that He will perform signs and wonders through him that will show that God is with him.
God uses us in our weakness. Moses is afraid that he is not the right man for the job. He even says to God, "But I've never been good at speaking, and I am slow of speech and tongue." But God says to him, "Now go, and I will help you speak and teach you what to say."
We all have weaknesses, things we don't feel very good at, or things we think hold us back from God being able to use us. For me, it is shyness. Although people don't necessarily think it now, I am actually very shy, and when I was younger I was extremely and cripplingly so. I would have never thought that God could use me to speak to others, but the great thing about God is that when we seek to live for Him, He gives us all we need. He uses us in our weaknesses. In 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9, God says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness."
God sends others. Even after all these amazing reassurances from God that He really does want to use Moses to free His people from Egypt, Moses still asks God to send somebody else. God responds by sending Moses' brother Aaron to go with him and speak for him. God will reveal to Moses what to say, and Aaron will act as his mouthpiece. So often, God sends us out or works through us in teams.
He places people in our lives to live for God with. Part of this is church and all the people that we get to live out our faith with. But it's also specific people that God places in our lives to live out the adventure that God has for our lives.
For our elders, Matt, Chris and Chris, God sent them out together as a team, as friends and as families to live out the exciting adventure that He had for them right here in Liverpool. So guys, we're going to stop there for this week, but why don't you take a minute to ask God to show you who He has placed in your life that you can journey with, or ask Him to send someone if you don't feel like you have somebody already.